Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmates. I am the first reporter of the group 13. Our topic is I am Mary Rose Batisting from BEd 2. Our topic is Unit 1, the overview of language policy and understanding the language. And ang cover ani is language policy and planning o language policy in the Philippines. Language policy will means the legislation on and practices pertaining to the use of languages in a society, often a nation, whereas the phrase language in education policy will be used to describe the legislation and practices pertaining to languages or media of instruction and languages of literacy used in basic education. So when we say language policy, it means mga laws of the land in regard to the use of a language in a certain community, region, or state. According to 1987 Constitution, familiar man siguro mo ani, human naman jud ani sa Prof. Ed 2 nato. Gi-stated to nga ang official language sa Philippines is Filipino and our second language is English. Maunang sa mga communications ug dili ma-express sa Filipino, English atong gamiton. And when we say pod nga ubingon pod tag language in education policy, this pertains to the laws of the land nga related sa paggamit unsa atong gamiton nga language sa field of education. Like naagi hapon dito sa 1987 Constitution nga ang official language nato is Filipino, maunang sa schools compulsory jud nga ma-learn ang Filipino, especially sa primary o secondary level. Kay diha man ang foundation years. So dapat makabalo ang mga estudyante sa national language which is Filipino. And gamiton sab ang Filipino na language sa mga subjects nga applicable ug kaya sa Filipino itudlo. Now, when it comes to our second language, which is English, naapod na sa 1987 Constitution nga second official language nga in case dili matudlo or ma-express ang isa ka subject, pwede sab nato gamiton ang English. Sabtan, language policy, it's helpful to review the role of language in society. Language has many forms. For example, there is a written form, formal varieties, and informal varieties. It has many functions. It is used as a medium of communication in different places and as a language for specific purposes. Yes, indeed true that language has many functions. So magamit siya as a medium of communication. Mao na atong ginagamit ron. When we use Filipino when we are in Manila, we use Filipino in order to communicate people. Kung nasa ta diri sa Visayas ug Mindanao, then we use a language that is known to everyone, which is Cebuano or Bisaya, para makapag-communicate ta. For example, kay istorya nimo, Mandarin, lisod sad ug Binisayon nimo, di jud mo magkasinabot ana. We use language to communicate and to understand one another. And it is a mean of communication. It is also used as a language for specific purposes. For example, sa technical writing, kung mag-send kang communication to our President Duterte, so you need to use English since it is our second official language. To understand one another and to convey thoughts and feelings. Okay, next. Edwards 2009 emphasizes the fact that in most parts of the world, multilingualism is a reality linked with geographical and environmental factors as well as economic interest fueling migration. The role of power relations is also an important to them associated with civil and international conflict as well as the impact of colonization. When languages come into contact with one another as people move for social, economic, or enforced purposes, the power of a larger or dominant language may cause a non-dominant language in a fewer domains. Speakers of non-dominant language may begin to feel ashamed of their language, believing the dominant language to have greater value. Government policy can contribute both to the revitalization and to the decline or death of a language. According to Robbins, 2005, 3 notes, linguistic diversity should not be seen as an insuperable problem but as a key factor in designing intervention in literacy and other areas of development. It is not known for linguistic diversity to be lauded as an important and valuable manifestation of cultural diversity. Yes, I agree to Edwards in 2019. He emphasized that most part of the world are into multilingualism. What is multilingualism? If we say multilingualism, this means the use of many languages. From the prefix multi, meaning many. Lingual, that's language, or lingualism use of language. So in part of the world, we use language. Just for example, specifically in the Philippines, we have a lot of dialects. Lahi-lahi kada region, lahi-lahi kada group of people, lahi-lahi sad kada community. Example, there is sa Agusan del Sur, na ay mogamit og Cebuano, Bisaya, Hiligaynon, Kamayo, Manubo. So mao na siya ang multilingualism. We are using different languages depende sa specific area, geographical area, ug depende pod sa interest. One bad effect lang sa multilingualism is ang feeling of inferiority sa use of language. Examples, diri sa Philippines. It's a common concept nga pagkabalo ka mag-speak in English fluently or not so fluent, but you can able to speak English language, ingnon kag wow, ka bright, abti kaayo. Kani maayo kay ni siya kay abti kay mo English, which is not always true in all situations. Because naiuban tao nga dili diay sila expressive in English when it comes to communication. Mas prefer nila or ganahan sila magbisaya. So ang multilingualism maupod ding bad effect niya kay sometimes ang isa ka tao that he or she knows more than one languages na ay feeling ma-develop na akin nilang ang language nga kung gamiton kay which is kini ang dialect inferior in English mo nang English ra kung gamiton kay since it is dominant and it is classic. So bad effect na siya sa multilingualism, inferiority of language which is dili dapat kung asa ka expressive or asa ka maayo mo gamit nga ma-express nimo imong thoughts and feelings, dito nimo siya gamiton. Mao nang sa mga beauty pageant like for example sa Miss Universe, gina-encourage jud nila nga pwede mag-use og native language ang usa ka contestant if she is not able to speak English language. But of course, in some other country, dili man nila ginastudihan ang English as their second language. Ang English lang is a foreign language to them. So it's their choice kung eskwela sila English or dili. Kay they are so holding pride to their language. Through setting government policy can contribute to both revitalization and a decline or death of a language. For example, diri sa ato sa Philippines. Sa 1987 Constitution gihapon, kung wala lang gibutang didto nga ang atong official language is Filipino, maybe karon kay ang atong official language is English na. Then dili na dayon kabalo mo ang mga tao mag-speak og Filipino. But since gibutang man sa Constitution nga ang atong official national language is Filipino, therefore itudlo jud ni siya sa mga schools. Naapod ni siya sa 1987 Constitution na ang itudlo sa mga schools labi na sa primary ug secondary level ang Filipino nga language. So naara jud sa government policy ang flourishment, revitalization or ang pagiging productive ng isang language. Or naapod sa government policy ang pagpa-extinct or pagpawala sa isa ka language, sa isa ka region or sa isa ka group of people. Kay pwede man i-declare sa national government, for example lang, English na jud ang gamiton sa tanan, all over the Philippines. Kung kana nga policy, English na gamiton sa tanan, so wala na'y mahimo ang mga tao kundi mo gamit nag English and then sooner or later mawala ng Filipino language sa context sa sa Philippine teaching system. Kay puros naman English, so mawala ng Filipino. So government policy jud ang isa sa mga factors sa pag-maintain sa language or pagpawala sa language. In short, naadjud sa gobyerno ang susi kung ipawala or ipa-develop pa jud nila ang usa ka language. But diri sa to sa Philippines, in our case, dili man jud pwede nga walaon ng Filipino kay of course mao man jud na atong language, so mao nang policy dapat natong sundon. Na diri sa kaning notes kay Robinson's na linguistic diversity should not be seen as an insuperable problem but as a key factor in deciding intervention. Ano siya? While being described in the same context as an impossible problem, in terms of educational usage, the intention of this chapter is to view both multilingualism and multiculturalism from an enabling perspective, countering a deficit perspective on multilingualism, and to acknowledge and affirm the languages of ethno-linguistic communities as a dynamic aspect of their identity. Though ang multilingualism has a problem on language inferiority, magamit pud nato ang multilingualism in a good way. Example, kining ginaingon nga linguistic diversity. Pag maingon kag diverse ang usa ka languages sa group of people, meaning diverse pud ilang culture. When we say diverse, nagkalain-lain. Diverse in a good way. Tapos productive kay daghan man sila mga variations sa usa ka language. So we can use linguistic diversity to develop more our culture, customs, and whatsoever for educational usage. For example, sa isa ka diverse community na ay kabalo mo speak og Mandarin, na ay mga tao kabalo mo speak og German, kana siya magamit nato na to learn another language. Language planning and policy. National government and regional agencies such as ASEAN or the European Union determine language policies that determine which languages will be used for what purposes, including deciding on the language and education policy. Tollefson and Chu 2004-2 note that it is common for the educational argument for a specific language in education policy to be subservient to the socio-political or economic agenda of the nation, and the responses to multilingualism within a nation can result in a variety of responses from political makers. According to Ruiz 1984-17 identifies three specific perspectives on language planning and multilingual situations. Language can be seen as a problem, language as a right, language can be seen as a resource. Munang ang language jud ang importante sa atoa diri sa every people to communicate one another. For example, ang Pinoy mo study og kaysa naman tay linguistic diversity. Gamit pud nato na siya para to learn more another language. For example, diri ang Pinoy may study og Mandarin kay naaman sa ilahang immediate community. They need Mandarin to communicate people. Mga Pinoy, pwede sad mo study og German kay sa ilang community daghay German, so inana ang linguistic diversity. Good point siya kay it can be used for educational purposes. Like for example, group of people can learn another language for them to communicate people in their community. Mao lang na siya sir ang akong report. Nasabtan ko and karon kay I will forward the report, the continuation of the report to Miss Abigail Hidalanan for the continuation of our report.
Maayong hapon sa tanan. Karon natong pagaisgutan about sa language planning and policy in Africa and Asia, specifically in India. First, we have Africa. A group of linguists from nations in post-colonial Africa and academics from around the world meet to discuss the impact of social change and national integration on language use and language development. So, diri as Africa on 1990s na ay duha ka grupo which is the linguists and the academics. Pag mayon tag-linguist, mao ni sila ang mga nag-study og language. So, kanang duha ka expert is nagtagbo sila para mahisgutan kung unsay mga epekto sa social or national man na siya nga panaghiusa sa paggamit sa sinultian o sa pagpalambo sa sinultian. So, mao na ilahang main goal nganong magtagbo sila ilahan ng isgutan kung unsa, what if ang isa ka nation na ay common language unsay result. So mao na yung mga hisgutanan nga ilahang gusto matubag. So Ferguson acknowledged the work of Fishman who described the challenges of the language policy issue. So si Fishman mao to siya ang nagsulat or nag-describe unsa nga mga challenges ang naa sa Africa. Pag maingon ta og language policy, this is a state as tension between nationalism and nationalism. Pag maingon ta og nationalism, this is the cultivation of national identity. So meaning this is identity. For example, sa Philippines, so ang ato ang nationalism is Filipino because this is our national identity. So sa Africa pod, ilaha dito is African. So, nationalism, the development of operational efficiency and administration and economic management for the maintenance of political stability. So, ang nationalism is mostly sa pagpapaunlad or more on lihok, no? More on lihok siya sa unsa na siya pagpapaunlad ng kausayan sa pagpatakbo sa pangangasiwa at pamamahala para mapanatili ang katatagan ng politika in Tagalog. So, more on kanang unsay mga development mao na ang sa nationalism. And then so naay volume, no, naay volume nga na publish ni na Fishman, Ferguson and Dascopta in 1968. Mao ni ang language problems of developing nation. So mao na ang na-publish nila, and then wala na lang na ako gisulatanan kay murag taas na siya kayo, so ako na lang i-explain sa inyo ha kung unsa akong nasabtan ana nga context. So if correct me if I'm wrong na lang, isa ako ang namali na kung nasabot, or si Sir Bals o si Sir Ayan tabangan ko nila sa pagpasabot. Back up, Sir. Char. So in this context, it could be said that language planning was organized around a European notion of the nation state in which citizens are unified around a common language. So diri is kanang nagplano bitaw sila, magplano kung unsaon pag-organize if kanang naay isa ka European nga naghuna-huna kung what if nga ang kini nga nation state is naay common language. So dapat nagkuan sila nga dapat ang isa ka bansa na ay common language. So mao nang sa first stanza nga akong nasabtan. Sa ikaduha is this lead to multilingualism being perceived as inefficient and having the potential to promote disunity in the early years of independence when social cohesion and economic development were core national goals. So sa Africa, according to sa akong na research, is na sila like freedom kung unsa ang ilahang gamiton na mga language is sa eskwelahan and classroom setting kanang every school naa sila'y pamalaot nga sila'y magbuot kung unsay language nga ang ilahang itudlo. For example, specific sa kuan magud sa akong nabasa nga research sa South Africa, ang school nila dito ang magbuot kung unsa ang itudlo nga medium of instruction. So kantahay kung pure English ang gamiton nga language, so language jud tanan dili pareha diri sa Philippines nga naka-organize na nga gikan from grade kindergarten to grade 3 we have mother tongue nga gamiton ato ang sa medium of instruction, and then sa grade 4 to grade 6 pwede na English, so English na gyud. So sa ilaha is school ang magbuot. Sa ato adiri is mostly government, diba? So inana ang pamalao dito sa Africa. And then however, as research on the cognitive and affective benefits of multilingualism has developed and post-colonial confidence has grown, while still concerned about the need to the link with new globalization processes and opportunities. That is why nga kasagaran dito is wala kabalo kung unsa ang mga sinultian, especially katong mga dili dominant nga sinultian. So still concerned gihapon sa taga-Africa dito ang inana tungod kay di ba pag maingon ta globalization is around the world, trading around the world. So kung wala sila common language, so mo na ang challenge sa ilaha kay you can talk kung unsa, especially katong sa mga remote areas. So kung unsa lang ang ilang sinultian dito mao lang. So di wala sila na inform kung naapad ay inani best because wala man gitudlo no. So dinhi maunang nailakbutan na rin nga, academics have increasingly been calling for the role of international colonial languages such as English, Portuguese, and French to have a more restricted rule and increased rule to be accorded to the African language. So, ano nang English, Portuguese, and French. Manang kasagaran dito is wala mailhi kung unsa ang ilahang sinultian tungod dili dominante ang mga sinultian kay naaman sila lahi-lahi nga mga sinultian. So manang challenge sa ilaha ang magkuan og common language. So mao na ko ang nasabtan sa language problems of developing nation. So mao na one of those problems nga naa sa Africa. And then sa Asia, India, the ethnologue lists more than 400 individual language for India. So pag maingon ta og ethnologue, this is a language of the world. So sa India they have a 400 individual language. So Hindi is one of their official language na that was written by Devanagari script. Pag maing Devanagari script, amo na sa pagbasa ana. Ay mura na siya og kanang murag alibata bitaw, kakabantay mo anang sa mga Thai na mga kanang sinulat inana ang forma sa Devanagari script. Then English operate as official language for central government. but the individual states are given the opportunity to decide what language they will use for local administration and education. So, English. So, pag so English ang pwede nimo imong istorya, but naa kay opportunity nga kung unsa ang imuhang suot nga mapa imong inistoryahan, so pwede ra sa ilaha, wala sila dili sila stricto nga oy dapat kini nga kuan ra gid ang imuhang sinultian. No, you have a freedom to express kung asa ka masiyang na mga sinultian. And then 22 nga sinultian ang giila alang sa official na so 22 na they have a 22 language nga official. Then it was kuan pod ni siya by the government, kanang napamalaod na ba through legislation na pod ni siya. So, language being recognized for their official purposes and supported legislation. So, 22 ni siya ka mga official language. Then, for example, Telugu, maunang official sa sinultian sa Andhra Pradesh. So, sa India, they have a different official language every lugar. So, naan sila ikintahin from sa sinultian sa Andhra Pradesh, they have Telugu, and sinultian sa kanang sa Pradesh sa katungkuan sa isa na pod ka lugar is Malayalam. So, they have a different kanang sinultian. Pareha ra pod sa Pilipino, no? Sa Philippines. So, sa Luzon, they have Tagalog. And then, sa Visayas, lahi-lahi na. Sa Mindanao, more on Visaya. So, inana po sa India. So, kini nga lugar, mao nilang istoryahan. Kini lugar, mao nilang istoryahan. So, mao nang nas like 22 official language. And then, kini nga naandan sa India. Mao na ang naandan sa India sa pagkuan para na sila mga lahi basta mo na lahang naandan. And then according to my research, nag-research po ko na sila itulo ka language nga ginatudlo. So English mandatory na sa ilaha nga dapat isulti na nimo ana, and then Hindi mo compulsory, then local na dayon. So, kung sa Philippines na ay L1, L2, L3, sa India, they have 3 also, English, Hindi, and local. And then, language and education policy requires states and local authorities for endeavor to provide elementary education in mother tongue for all linguistic minorities regardless of whether their language is official in the state. So, ang mga government sa India is naning kamot nga matagaan ang elementary education og kanang mother tongue ang pwede nila ginasulti. So, ilahan ang gipaning kamutan nga pwede ang ilang sinultian dito is mao ang ginatudlo. So, mao na siya ang naa sa India. I hope nga namoy nasabtan. Maarto siya. Thank you.
Let me first introduce myself. I am Jeris Bilguala, and my report is all about the country of Europe. So here's the information that I've got in this country. Industrial Revolution. It is the increased mechanization of production systems and the move from agriculturally based economic systems. It was a major turning point in social and political history. So, meaning to say, Industrial Revolution, it is the process of change from an agrarian and handicraft economy to one dominated by industry and machine manufacturing. So, kini siya nga process nagbegun in Britain in the 18th century and from there spread to other parts of the world. So, itong Industrial Revolution ay nagmamarka ng isang pangunahing punto sa kasaysayan. Ito ay ang pagbabagong anyo mula sa agrikultura patungo sa isa pang industriyang bansa. So until the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the early part of the 19th century, communities tended to be geographically isolated and the impact of national culture on local communities was limited. By Cartwright 2006, 196. When we say geographically isolated, it is the significant moment when something makes change separated from the mainland population, no? So, impact of national culture and local communities was limited. When we say local communities, it is a group of interacting people living in a common location. So these can be seen in the Celtic-speaking peoples of Britain. So when we say Celtic-speaking peoples of Britain, kuan ni sila? Mga tao ni sila nga nagpuyo in Britain during the Iron Age Celts until the 18th century. They were simply known as Britons. Britons means it is a native or subject of Great Britain, especially it is the English man. So next is the Basques in Spain. The Basque, meaning to say it is a region between France and Spain. It is the near in the Pyrenees Mountains and the Bay of Biscay. And the next one is the Frisians of the Netherlands. When we say Frisians, it are a West Germanic ethnic group indigenous to the coastal regions of the Netherlands and northwestern Germany. However, post-industrial revolution, the dominant language communities, often those holding critical political power, they adopted an assimilationist approach to national language education and economic policy. It is the assigning resources based on the potential of communities to contribute to national development strategies. Okay, when we say assimilationist approach, it is to become like others or help another person to adapt to a new environment. So, diri siya, it is para lang yun to improve the lives of its citizens. Maoning ilahangi adopt ang assimilationist approach. And then next is Wales. What is Wales best known for? It is famous for its rugged coastline, mountainous national parks, and not forgetting the Celtic Welsh language. It's a pretty cool country to live in or to visit. So, mo ni siyang mga information nga naa sa Wales. Industrialization and the resultant internal economic migration from more rural countries to South Wales is identified as a key factor in the decline of the Welsh language in the early 20th century by Ferguson 2006-89. Immigration from England to Wales diluted the traditional function of Welsh language in social life. Edward 2009-13. When we say Welsh language, ang meaning ani Welsh language is it is one of the oldest language in Europe. So, diri nga part, no, Welsh increasingly became a language that had limited function in a community because limitado lamang na ang ilahang paggamit sa ilahang language because naa na diri ang English was used in multiple domains. So English speakers remain monolingual. Monolingual refers to someone who speaks only one language. No, generally they need to be able to communicate fluently in one language. Speakers were required to become bilingual. Bilingual person is someone who speaks more two languages. So in 1870 Elementary Education Act, it is the exclusion of the Welsh language from formal education. It was determined in this act. It was an additional factor in the decline of Welsh. So as English became increasingly used in governance, law, and education, the domains in which Welsh language was seen as a cultural artifact. And then in Act of 1967, Welsh language gave official equality to Welsh and English. And then in 1993, Welsh and English were accorded equal status in public life and in legal domains. And Welsh language television channel in 1982, it is the significant victory for activists. When we say activist, ang mga aktivista ay ito ay mga taong may sariling pananaw tungkol sa pagmamalakad ng gobyerno o anumang organisasyon. And then in 1960s, enroachment, pagpasok of English was addressed. So, kaning akong gipangyaw mga information ra ni siya nga naa sa Wales, sa country na Wales. And to sum up, bilingual education became a key component in language revitalization in Wales, with an increasing number of children from English-speaking homes learning Welsh in school and becoming functionally multilingual. So that ends my report, and that's all. Thank you.
Magandang araw po. My name is Adora G. Ortego, reporter number 4. Luxembourg. Language policy in Europe continues to be strongly influenced by social and economic concerns. Luxembourg is a small nation-state in Western Europe, which is officially a Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. It is a landlocked country in Western Europe, where many of the population are already bilingual or multilingual. Kung yung tag-bilingual, kani siya is a person speaking of two languages fluently. Ang multilingual is in or using several languages. The linguistic situation in Luxembourg is characterized by the practice and the recognition of the three languages, the French, German, and Luxembourgish, or kanang uba ginatawag siya nga Litzi-Borgisch. Litzi-Borgisch is a Franconian language of the Moselle region, similar to German and Dutch, that was introduced in primary grades in 1912. Litzi-Borgisch is a national language that has been that the government gives status to be established as their national language by the law in 1984. It is gihimo siyang national language to forge national and cultural cohesion and to mitigate against the linguistic influences from neighboring countries because of the foreign language that brought in Luxembourg by the immigrant population. Ang kanang mga foreign languages sa ilaha is ang English, Italian, and Portuguese. The laws also recognize three languages of Luxembourg, the German, French, and Luxembourgish as an administrative languages, but French remains the language of legislation due to the application of Napoleonic Civil Code in Luxembourg. As documented by Kanagaraja, recent to 2006-160, the move from an industrial economy to Luxembourg development as a center for the international banking sector has emphasized the need for its citizens to become increasingly fluent in English, French, and German. Kaya in case of na citizens asked question in either those three languages or uban pa nga katong lahi pa katong kabalik ka languages sa nalagi kanang three ka language English, French, and German is matubag dayon sa person in charge or kinsa tong gipangutana as far as possible in the language in which the question was asked. Also, among the diverse conceptualization of language, they use three features, most prominently national languages spoken in multinational corporations or MNCs, officially mandated corporate languages, and English as the language of global business. Kay kasagaran man gud pag magkuan kanang mag-trade og mga or kanang mga business nga kuan nato English man jud kasagaran ginagamit kay murag nahimo na siya. Okay, ang English is an international language naman siya. In international business, typically conceptualize lingua franca as a common language different from the parties mo na tong English nga kuan nga language. Education includes more dominant regional languages from early grades. By the end of secondary school, learners will be sufficiently trilingual to use Luxembourgish, French, and German for a variety purposes. Pag mo yung tawag trilingual, kana mo na siya a person speaking three languages fluently. Dire ang sa Luxembourg, Luxembourgish or Luxembourgish is taught at the primary level. There is an introductory program in French since 2017 to 2018 when Luxembourgish children are first taught to read and write in public school. German ang ginatudlo sa ilaha dito. The language of instruction po sa primary education, primary schools or public primary schools, kuan paghapon is German gihapon. Moreover, Luxembourgish is taught only 1 hour per week at secondary school and only in the first years. Dili na siya mo sa second years. Sa first year, yun siya taman. Then, 1 hour per week lang po dito ang Luxembourgish nga ilahang kuan kay Luxembourgish nahimo naman nilang mother tongue balik kay mo man nilang national language. Next. Language policy in the Philippines. Bautista 1999-113 offered a scene-setting Filipino perspective on the challenges of language and education, who notes that the language problem of the Philippines, according to most Filipino sociolinguistics, is the problem of reconciling the competing demands of ethnicity embodied in an individual's mother tongue or vernacular, nationalism manifested in having and propagating a national language, and modernization, seen to be synonymous with using an international language. Andrea sa reconciling competing sa problem in reconciling the competing demands of ethnicity, most ethnic groups compete for the same goal. Kanani is notably kasagaran ani is power, access to resources or territory, and also linguistic characteristics. Then sa nationalism, the issues I highlighted eliminate the shifts in the politics of language in the country as they have been played out the backdrop of anti-colonial struggle. It promotes the interest of a particular nation, especially with the aim of giving and maintaining nation sovereignty, also in propagating the national language. The modernization that seemed to be synonymous with using an international language, it proposed recent social phenomenon that needs of the modern society. For example, mass educational system demands that trained individuals must be absorbed in occupational roles commensurate with their training and knowledge. Number 2 is the social problem is that the structural changes is uneven during periods of modernization. Tulipson, 1991, 142 and Rapa and Wei 2006-72 discussed the complementary roles of Filipino and English. English is seen as an instrumental language of modernity supporting economic progress because English is used as a tool in cross-cultural communication and in international business. It also implies modernity also implies an intellectual outlook based on self-knowledge and rational argument. It also implies particular forms of social relation based on forms of capitalism. Filipino is viewed as a means of reinforcing the ideological status of the Philippines as an independent nation state, facilitating intergroup communication. Bilang isang malayang bansa at Filipino is bilang isang malayang bansa at pinapabilis nito ang komunikasyon sa pagitan ng mga pangkat. As a national language, it is a widely spoken and it is the mother tongue of an estimated 25 million Philippines. Kay kasagaran manggod diri sa ato ay naga-speak na yun siya og Filipino. Mo nang gihibura siya, nahimo na siya mother tongue. Sa ato mother tongue, kibali sa ato mother tongue, Bisaya or unsa pa. Dito sa katong mga Tagalog ginadaan ilahang ginistrihan mo to ilahang nahimo mother tongue. Din kay Philippines sa ato is nahimo man siyang second language. It is also the inter-ethnic lingua franca of most Filipinos. Ang Filipino nahimo na siyang barang inter-ethnic lingua franca sa tanan mostly sa mga Filipinos. The design approaches to language education for learners in the Philippines is a complex issue given the diversity of language, culture, and preschool experiences brought by children in a nation of 7,000 islands in which more than 180 languages are spoken. Lewis and Company, 2015. The Philippine Education for All, when we say design approaches is the inside out approach and outside in approach which can explain how to different types of product functions, product working function, and human using functions. The Philippine Education for All report, World Education Forum 2000 internet article states that Philippines has had few problems or deficiencies with respect to access the participation in the primary education level. It is diri sa kuan kasagaran problema diri sa gikuan sa Education for All. I-report niya is kanang mga children who had been left out, precisely those in the hard to reach areas and marginalized communities. Also, ang education authorities say that the relative small proportion that was not in school was composed in the main children who resided in hard to reach localities on areas where there were no schools. Such places usually covered indigenous and tribal communities and other ethnic minorities. Muna ang kasagaran problema sa kanang dili bitaw makaeskwela ng mga bata kay tungod sa kalayo or kanang dili maabot din sa kuan ang ilahang kon motong na kwantong ALS to alternative learning system nga kuan sa depend na siguro nakalimot ko basta mo tong nahimo tong ALS kay para ang ALS man good is gisulod-sulod siya og kanang mga kuan na mga baryo kanang mga secluded bitaw kanang dili na bitaw maabot sa kanang gibali layo na sa sentro sa tuang kuan siya gaadto sa mga barangays nga dili na kuan sa atua. Next, understanding of language in education policy development in the Philippines is best understood through awareness of both international strategies associated with language policy and practice. Concerns about all learners were focused both the education for all strategies and Millennium Development Goals. Ang concern sa mga learners about sa ilahang kuan is about sa ilahang school enrollment, attendance and retention. Muna siya ang mga kuan kasagaran sa mga learners. Inclusive strategies address the needs of minority language communities and multilingual context formed them for 2015 World Education Forum in Korea. Ensuring by 2015 all children, particularly girls children in difficult circumstances and those belonging to ethnic minorities have access and to complete free and compulsory primary education of good quality. Muna siya ang 6 goals sa sa education for kalimut ko 6K goals which aim to meet the learning needs of all children, youth and adults. Muna ang kwan sa education for all strategies and Millennium Development Goals. However, language policy relates to education cannot be examined in isolation from the community and the broader social, economic, political context and that impact in provision. Rasul and Edwards 2010 280. May 2001 167 notes that education is viewed as perhaps the key institution in the development and maintenance of the modern nation state. More than 180 minority language communities, Lewis and Company, 2015, the Philippines rich and diverse linguistic and cultural heritage. Within plans for the development of appropriate education strategies in the Philippines in the decade 2005-2015, it is evident that effective educational provision is viewed as a foundation resource for effective local and national development. With access to the global opportunities and improved education approaches are viewed as economic investment providing equity of access and quality of provision for social progress in the nation. It is the Philippine Department of Education 2006-15. However, these communities faced of marginalized identity on the national level, those alternative policy solutions are required if equitable access to an opportunity for education is to be achieved. The identities of non-dominant language communities are undermined that can result in social and economic inequalities, giving those who do not learn Filipino. They have fewer opportunities. Katong sa mga Filipino, itong sa mga tao nga dili kabalo mag-speak of Filipino, they have fewer opportunities to participate in public life, access higher education, then dali ra pud ma-impluwensyahan ang ilahang political decisions, and they embrace economic opportunities. The greatest cause of the widespread of the lack of education mo na siya katong mga kulang sa education, katong kulang sa katong mga Filipino, itong mga tao nga parang kulang ilahang nabal-an, is the hardening and perpetuation of social exclusion, as the uneducated also become the poorest, those most vulnerable to shocks, the voiceless in culture, the powerless in politics, and those denied access to health and knowledge. Mo na ni siya.
Language Policy of the Department of Education 1974-1987. So, required ra jud diri sa Pilipinas nga ang gamiton sa pag-instruct is Filipino o English. Pero napoy uban ning guwahe nga pwede nato gamiton nga gitawag nga auxiliary language. Later na nako istorya kung unsa ang i-explain kung unsa ang auxiliary language. The language policy, the teacher use either Filipino domain o English domain depende sa subject nga iyang gihandle, divided into two domains. English was defined as the language of instruction for the delivery of communications, arts, mathematics, science. So, diri basta sa mga subject nga arts, science, mathematics, ang gamiton ana nga pag-instruct is English. Asa man ta naka-encounter of nagtudlo og science pero dili kong English. Di ba English jud ang gigamit? Okay, next is Filipino. Medium of instruction for all subjects in the curriculum. Example, Makabayan, IPP. Di ba, mga Filipino ginaang gamiton o hikasi. Next is ang intention jud ani is para ma-implement ang bilingual policy. So, base sa recommendation of the Soriano Committee, the National Board on Education issued Resolution Number 73-2 Series 1973, Official Policy on Bilingual Education in the Philippines. So unsa man daw ning bilingual policy? What is bilingual policy? Ang bilingual policy daw, mao daw ni sinugdanan sa pag-improve sa language teaching in the Philippines. Kay ang mga magtutudlo dili na daw mo-rely or mogamit og mga instructor drills og memorization nga gibuhat sa una sa English only policy. Nakapos ko sa una elementary ko para lang makasabot mig English sige ra mig pa-memorize na mig poems kanang kuan ni Rizal, My Last Farewell. Sige ra mig pa-memorize hangtod nga para lang makasabot mig English. Mao na ang English policy sa una. In the 1987, the bilingual education policy is revised by DEX Order Number 52. 52 ra ni 5525. Gi-revise so giutro siya. In this revised policy, the regional languages were elevated to the role of auxiliary language. Giotro siya og auxiliary language. Karon unsa man ning auxiliary language? Example, akong estudyante kay mga indigenous people. Mao na sila akong tudloan. Tapos ang akong subject kay English. Tapos akong gamiton pag-instruct kay English ra. Makasabot ba ng mga indigenous people kung sige ra English? Dili jud sila makasabot. So akong gamiton is mogamit kog auxiliary language. Unsa man ang auxiliary language? Example, rain. Unsa man sa Tagalog ang rain, ulan. Sa Manubo, udan. Udan ang sa Manubo. Ang auxiliary ana kay ang udan. So sa pamaagi aning auxiliary na akong gigamit, murag makasabot ang mga estudyante nako. Mao day nang ang udan di ay sa Tagalog kay ulan. Ang sa English po di ay kay rain. Okay, mao na ang auxiliary language. Ang purpose ani diri sa Philippines is para mahimong bilingual nation nga ang mga nagpuyo is competent or kabalo mo English o Filipino. Makita sa diri nga mas maayo ni nga policy kaysa sa early practice nga wa nagsalig sa availability sa materials in local vernacular languages but nara sa pagbuot sa isa ka magtutudlo to choose para ma-develop ang ilang curriculum o para sa maangkop sa panginahanglanon sa locality. Thank you.
The rule of English in the Philippines. The use of English, a result primarily of the American colonial legacy, has a considerable impact, particularly in education system. It is believing that it has damaged the self-esteem of ethno-linguistic communities and the internal unity of these communities. Since the English is the main source of communication globally. Sa unang panahon, kay ang mga American, they are from England, so they are English. They are Africans jud ng mga naa sa Amerika. That's why na ay Black American and Africans. Dito sa ila nagsugod ang mga sayaw like cramping, lacking, and everything because they like dancing. Because they like there is strong support for the use of English in education and in society for instrumental purposes. So the House Bill 4701 on strengthening and enhancing the use of English as the medium of instruction in the Philippines schools was passed in the House of Representatives in 2006. So President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo who certified the House bill as urgent, and it received strong support from the business community, which saw the use of English in school as a component towards increasing the global economic competitiveness of the Philippines. However, Acuña and Miranda state that there is hardly any clause for English to be the national language. Acuña and Miranda found that the English taught in Philippine school has not necessarily prepared migrant workers for the job that they would prefer. In 1994, former President Ramos said, "Since we have that comparative advantage in English, by all means, let us maintain the advantage so that we can be more competitive in business and production and perhaps in education in this part of the globe." So, ang kaning English, tungod aning English, taas kayo gika abtan ning kaning English, di ba? Niabot pa gani siya dinhi sa Philippines. Sa akong pagkabalo karon, ang Irish is di na sila kabalo mo litok sa ilahang first language. Di na sila kabalo mo istorya. I mean, di na sila kabalo mo sabot. So kasagaran sa ilaha is ang makasabot na lang is siguro mga lumad na lang sa ilaha, mga inana na nasa mga bukid-bukid. Pero kasagaran sa ilaha is di na gyud sila ka sabot kay tungod na adapt na nila ang English sa ilaha as mao na ilahang nahimong kuan kaning mao nilang nahimong first language nila. So gikalimtan na nila ang ilahang first language. So mao na ang the role of English in the Philippines is kaning maka-communicate ta globally. So maski bisan asa ta mag-adto through the use of English, magkasinabot ta ninyong tanan.
towards a multilingual education policy. Jose D. Aguilar, Sibaya 1999C, 1999A, Nulasco 2008. The first Iloilo experiment was undertaken from 1948 to 1954, who pioneered in the use of Hiligaynon as medium of instruction in grade 1 and grade 2. So, si Jose D. Aguilar siya ang first Iloilo nga nag-experiment nga iya gigamit as medium of instruction ang Hiligaynon language sa pagtudlo sa grade 1 and grade 2. Hiligaynon taught children outperforming English taught children in her reading, math, and the social studies. Nulasco 2008, the second Iloilo language experiment on 1961 to 1964. Nulasco also, the Rizal experiment on 1960 to 1966, and the 6-year first language component bridging program or FLCBP on transitional education in Ifugao province. Libuangan first language component Walter and Dicker 2008. However, despite paman-ani na mga innovations nga nag-support sa paggamit sa local languages in education, ang bilingual education policies primarily gi-acknowledge gihapon sa paggamit as auxiliary languages to be used orally lang siya. Mother tongue-based multilingual education initially through Department of Education Order Number 74 Section 2009 or Department of Education 2009. Language in education policy in the Philippines moved from a bilingual education policy to a multilingual approach. So this was the point at which the language in education policy to a multilingual approach, recognizing the diversity of linguistic richness in the nation and its contribution to effective learning. So in September 14, 2010, the government initiated Alternative Learning System or ALS. It is a curriculum for indigenous peoples or IPs. Education was institutionalized through DepEd Order Number 101. But it is also moved a multilingual policies and awareness of the importance of language in education from only the formal sector to the non-formal sector.
Institutionalization of MTB-MLE or Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education. In 2013, Philippine Education System through Republic Act 1053-3 associated implementing rules and regulation in addition to mandating a 13-year K-12 education system specified Section 10 that the curriculum for the basic education in the Philippines shall adhere to the principles and framework of Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education or MTB-MLE, which starts from where learners are and from what they already know, proceeding from the known to unknown. So, dari sa year 2013, ang Philippine Education System is nag-mandate sila sa pag-add og another year sa education nga mao gitawag og K-12 program or senior high school. Sa ilahang pag-mandate nagpatuman pod sila og rules og regulation pinaagi sa Republic Act 1053-3 nga kani nga curriculum sa basic education is dapat sundon nila ang principles o framework sa Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Education MTB-MLE kung asa ang learners or ang bata or ang magtutuon nakastart sa iyahang education, sa iyang understanding, sa iyang learning. nga gikan sa iyahang nahibal-an na hantod sa maproceed na siya sa or mapadayon siya didto padulong sa dapat mabalaan pa sa bata o sa wala pa niya mahibal-i. Next step is kindergarten and the first 3 years of elementary education, instruction, teaching materials, and assessment shall be in the regional or native language of the learners. DepEd formulate a mother language transition program from the mother first language to subsequent language of the curriculum that is appropriate to the language capacity and needs of learners from grade 4 to grade 6. So, dari gikan sa kindergarten or pag ang bata na pa sa kindergarten hantod sa first 3 years of elementary education or grade 1 to grade 3, pag ang teacher dapat nga ang ihatag nga language sa bata is mao ang iyahang native language or iyahang mother language sa paghatag og instruction sa pagtudlo, pag-assist sa bata. Ang DepEd is nagpatuman siya og mother language transition program o nagpatuman siya og program nga gikan sa mother language or first language sa bata is mapulihan siya og language or inistoryahan inistoryahan or language nga present sa curriculum nga gipatuman sa education nga mao ang dapat nga haom or sakto nga language nga kinahanglan sa bata pag ang bata na siya sa magpatong na siya og level sa grade 4 to grade 6. Kumbaga ang DepEd formulate siya og program kung gikan sa mother language sa bata or diri sa example is gikan sa Bisaya is mapulihan na siya og language o pulihan siya og another language nga naa dito sa curriculum nga gipatuman. Dito sa curriculum nga gipatuman. Mao na siya ang itudlo sa bata pag ang bata na siya sa grade 4 to grade 6. Next slide. Filipino and English shall be gradually introduced as a language of instruction until such time where these two languages become the primary language of instruction at the secondary level. So, dapat pag ang bata na sa grade 4 to grade 6 is dapat dira i-introduce na yun nato pag ang bata gani magpato na grade 4 introduce na dira so good or anam na natugtudlo sa bata ang Filipino ug English nga language pinaagi sa pagtudlo, paghatag og instruction, pag-discuss sa klase or unsa pa nga mga ginabuhat sa teacher sa pag-handle og bata. Dapat dapat ang kanang Filipino ug English is matudlo na siya sa bata pag patudlo na siya sa bata sa grade 4 to grade 6 na siya. Hantod sa mag-abot na ang time nga kanang Filipino ug English nga gitudlo nato sa bata sa grade 4 pa siya hantod grade 6 is mahimo na siya nga mao ang primary language or mao na siya ang language nga ginagamit sa pagtudlo sa mga teacher sa secondary level. Mother tongue-based multilingual education described in the Republic Act reflects best practice in program implementation aligned with the theoretical position in the program design. Program designed by educators, BSIC 2006, Thatcher 2004, and Cummins 2000. So, dali ang sa Republic Act nga katong 1053-3, ang mother tongue-based multilingual education is siya ang pinaka the best nga practice sa program nga gipatuman sa education nga align siya or nakalinya siya sa kung unsa ilahang gi-aim nga mahitabo or gi-aim nila nga makabot sa ilahang gipatuman nga program nga gi-design or nga mao ang gipatuman sa educator sa Baker 2006, Dutcher 2004, ug Camis 2000.
Good afternoon, everyone. My report is all about the summary sa Chapter 1, Overview of Languages, Policies, and Practice in Education Around the World. Multilingualism is viewed from many different perspectives internationally, and the use of multiple languages in education is assessed from historic, political, economic, and social perspectives. When we say multilingualism, una siya ang ability sa individual nga makasturya or makakommunicate, speaker para makakommunicate effectively in 3 or more languages. Unlike sa monolingualism, una siya ang makagamit og only one language. A person who can speak multiple languages is known as polyglot or a multilingual. Ang ano siya ang 3 represents our first variable. However, as noted in another chapter in this volume, sa naingon pa ani nga chapter, the psycholinguistic and learning theories underpinning the uses of the learner's most familiar language in initial literacy learning are irrefutable. Hindi masabi or impossible to deny or disprove. Throughout the world, different approaches to mother tongue based on multilingual education are being implemented to respond to the different context. Siyempre, sa atong education, magamit din taglailahi nga mother tongue. Isang Bisaya, Tagalog, English, or sa kung saon sa language. Mother tongue based on multilingual education is encouraged and supported by international agencies and development organizations. In the Philippines, different approaches to the use of the mother tongue in education have been tried. Diriya sa Pilipinas, lahi-lahi man gyud ang ginagamit nga mother tongue. Which is magamit og Bisaya, Tagalog, English, depende sa mga inistoryahan sa tao. Have been tried, but currently a strong multilingual education policy is a part of our Republic Act. Part yapon siya sa Republic Act, requiring compliances throughout the education system. So, this is the last slide of the summary sa report. Thank you for listening.